Hello, and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri.
And Amy Cornell.
And I'm really excited about this episode, Amy. I know we've talked about this in the green room. I'm excited because we hear this all the time when authors get overly attached to outcomes. And look, we're not saying that we don't want you to have author goals and all the things, but I think we want to turn the conversation of the attachment to outcomes a little bit on its head, because a lot of it doesn't really serve the authors very well. I mean, would you agree?
Right. Yes. I mean, it's where should your validation be coming from? And this also speaks to book marketing is about consistency. Success in publishing is about consistency. And if you determine your success based on, has this happened by now? Has this happened by now? Has this happened by now? You're missing out on the things that are going to plan or things that you could better focus on.
Right.
And it's easy to get derailed and frustrated. I think a lot of the frustration comes from showing up with certain expectations that are just honestly not realistic for the industry,
Right.
So it's not even about like, no, you need to squash some of those goals. It's quite literally, a lot of times expectations are just developed out of thin air and they're not grounded in what's really working in the market.
But the other piece of it though too is that, and we are going to give you, so we're going to talk both about what this looks like. So you can say, oh my gosh, yes, this is something that I absolutely do. We're also going to talk about some solutions to this issue, because the problem is that social media and author communities specifically, they magnify the comparison stuff and the success envy. And I've said this before, and I'm going to repeat it again in the episode because it's worth repeating, is I'm not opposed to author communities, but the problem is that there's a lot of sharing of huge, big, impressive news and numbers and things like that. And there's, nobody's really bringing the receipts, so to speak. Right. So, and the other problem is too, and when I've talked to authors before, so two problems. So publishing is not an instant gratification kind of thing. And it feels instant gratification, right? Because you can write a book and then you can hit publish on Amazon and boom, instant gratification, your book is done. Your book is done, it's up. And now you can just kind of sit back and wait for all the things to happen, right? So independent publishing to some degree has kind of fed into that instant gratification, which is unfortunate. The other piece of it though too is, and I talk to a lot of authors who don't really fully believe in their book. And I understand that hesitation as an author myself. I remember my first book that I published, it's an emotional journey, right? And I would have dreams that people just hated my book and it was awful. And if any of you have ever experienced that, like, you are my people, because you told, so there's a lot of that kind of hesitation because it's a deeply personal project, right? So we as authors, oftentimes we look for external proof, and that external proof, when that doesn't happen, that undermines everything that we do. And I've actually had authors literally with really talented authors who potentially could go do tremendous things with their career, just give up because that proof wasn't showing up within the time frame that they had determined. Like, well, I should be pitching, if I pitch 20 influencers, I should get at least, 18 of them should respond to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing is true for, Amazon ads or any kind of ads. Like, I'm running ads, I should see sales right away. I have this slide, Amy, when I do my book talk on book launch. And the slide set, the one slide shows the golden tickets on America's Got Talent, like the golden, like when a contestant gets the golden buzzer and all the golden tickets fall down, right? And I'll say, a lot of times when you launch a book, this is what you expect. And you see the person said, like, yay, golden tickets, all the things. And then the next slide has basically a cat holding a black balloon just standing in a corner. It's kind of depressing because that's a lot of times that's the way authors feel when they've launched a book. They're like, well, I was really expecting a huge, like the golden ticket party. And basically I'm just here in a room by myself.
Right. Yeah. No,
You know?
that's 100%. I actually just responded to an email that we got today about that because a very motivated fiction author, and when they wrote into us, they said, and granted, when people write into us, I don't assume that they've unleashed their full scope of all their goals, all their needs, all their, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
nobody wants to write that much. That's why we start the conversation. But this individual very much focused on traditional media. And this is a speculative fiction author. There are things that, and we've done plenty of shows on media, and we will continue to do those just because we want y'all to be successful with that. But a lot of that has to do with going after the right opportunities, not just all opportunities. But anyway, so, to your point, when we work with this author, hoping that we do, we want to move forward with realistic expectations that they can feel good about in terms of what is realistic and appropriate for the market that they're writing for,
Right.
And realistically, that is not going to be that, coveted interview on Today. That's just not how it works,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
we've always been very honest with authors about realistic expectations because, and I love this line, attachment to specific outcomes turns marketing from strategy into emotional gambling. And I love the note that we have because I thought that is so spot on. So if you're just chasing very specific wins and not building an actual strategy and a platform and a brand that readers and even media and influencers can relate to and understand, you're missing the point.
Yeah.
And you're going to waste a lot of time and money going after things that are never going to come together because there's too many holes in that plan.
Well, and I think that, one of the things that we talk a lot about is the learning curve. So when an author is going it alone, or even if they've hired a company and they're doing some stuff on their own, there's still a learning curve, right? And authors tell me this all the time. Like, I learned so much with my first book that I would never do with my second. I learned so much with my first and second book that I would never do with my third. And I think that's amazing. So, if you can change this language a little bit, and I'm not trying to get like all motivational woo woo, although as anybody who knows me knows, I really love that stuff. I totally vibe with it. But I think that, as you are learning which influencers, for example, right, are the best fit, instead of, I should just be getting more hits. Why am I not getting more hits? And then because that turns all the attention back on you and makes you and your book just a big failure, when really maybe it just needed more time, or maybe needed to change influencers. And that's where, and I'm going to say this again, and I want to give a shout out because we got a review from somebody who's like, I'm starting the marketing journal thing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, you are my people. But that's really where tracking everything that you do to market your book helps you to see what worked and what didn't. So instead of focusing on the things that you're not getting, right? You're looking like, oh, well, I did this 3 weeks ago and this worked really well. And maybe I should try that again.
Right.
And I also think, Amy, timelines are a thing that we see authors a lot of times they get very caught up in timelines, and marketing and any kind of success in publishing is cumulative. It's never linear. And this is when authors say to me, if I work with you for 90 days or whatever, like, what's going to happen on day one? And, a lot of times I'm like, well,
Probably not a lot.
not a lot. Like, I'm flat out, because it's all very cumulative, and we see this all the time, right?
Right. And I've done a couple of reminders of that recently. And our clients actually, the responses are always very appreciative because it is easy to get, especially because of so much that is out there. Like you said, the comparison and this idea of what success is in publishing, reminding them that launch day And not to diminish what you've been working on, but really to give you a different perspective. Launch day is just 24 hours. You know what I mean? It's here, it's gone. And can you imagine like putting all of your hopes and dreams and, potential for success on launch day?
Yeah. No,
In a
it would.
24-hour
Yeah.
period? Like, we would never do that to ourselves in any other aspect of our lives, right? Yet books get put in that box all the time.
Books. Yeah, truly. I mean, that's like the dieter who just like, I'm going to have a salad for lunch and I should have lost 5 pounds by dinner. I mean, that,
Right.
it's kind of the same. It's a little bit the same mindset.
Right. Exactly.
There's a lot in publishing and marketing your own book that you can't control, right? So you really have to, I mean, we would both encourage you to stop focusing on what you can't control and focus on what you can, right? So you can control, how many pitches that you send out this week, and you can control how many bookstores that you contact. But the other thing that and this is something that I really love, Amy, I want you to kind of take this one. The micro wins are something that I don't think that we really spend enough time talking about.
Right. Yes. And it's interesting because wins it's like you have to broaden your definition of what a win is.
Yeah.
A win is honestly anything that you do for your book, your brand, your platform that is an improvement. And maybe that sounds super lame, but I promise you it's not. Because as we say all the time, everything is your resume that is out there for public consumption.
Mm-hmm.
And, you're only as good as the weakest links, right? So updating your author bio, double checking your book description. Is it as dynamic as it really could be? Have you asked objective third parties to read your book description and give you honest feedback? We say it all the time, but I'll say it again a million times over. You are often way too close to your own work to be objective about your book description, about your cover. Like, there's so many things that because you know it so intimately, you cannot fully put yourself in the shoes of a consumer.
Yeah.
Getting that outside feedback is so important. And, don't try to, this is another big one, don't blow all your options by pitching every blogger or influencer that you can find the first week your book is out before you have any reviews, especially if you're a new author. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there's also, and we have done shows on this, and maybe we can revisit, a fun timeline show, Penny, where we can kind of give people an idea of what goes where. But doing things in the right order also is very strategic.
Yeah.
And not jumping the line with the big wins, So it's like, well, I want to do my pitching right away because that's the exciting stuff. I want to get coverage. But the reality is you're probably not going to get a lot of coverage if you're a new author and you don't have much of a platform and you don't have any reviews yet. Nobody's going to stick their neck out that much. So doing things in the right order and making sure you're showing up with a product and a retail page that is really enticing and ready to convert really is what should be happening when your book first comes out. It's not those big interviews. That is not the order of things.
Well, and it's also, I mean, when you talk about doing things in the right order, I mean, I've had authors that have said, they've come to us after they've done a lot of pitching on their own and they got no results from it, and they didn't have an author website, right? For example, their retail page was not great. So, and maybe and it could be, I don't know without going through their list whether or not they were even pitching the right people. So doing things in the right order is also really important. And I think I'm going to go back to the journal again. I love me some journals, man. I really, really do. And notebooks. Authors love their notebooks. I don't understand but we love our notebooks. Notebooks make us feel more productive. I don't know why that is, but it's the truth. Keep a progress journal. So, like an effort tracker, results tracker, something that feels tangible so that you can track what you've done. Because when I talk about marketing and publicity, and I've said this to authors, if I had a dime for every time I've said this to authors in the 25 years I've been in business, I would be doing this call from my home in the south of France. a lot of what you're doing feels invisible, right? So granted, okay, so you're pitching people so you can see the email in your outbox. Like, I get it. But a lot of it feels like invisible work. Like you're just sending it out there into the ether and you're kind of hoping for the best. So the results tracker, effort tracker, progress journal, whatever you want to call it, really helps with, oh, I did that a month ago. That's right. I remember, not only to track what worked and versus what didn't, but also so you don't forget what you did,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yes. And we haven't mentioned it in a while, but I feel like everybody listening so far should have already seen our book marketing planner. If you haven't gotten it yet,
Yes.
you know, let us know, get in touch, because it really is a great tool that at minimum, to Penny's point, get the tracker and use it to help you outline what you want to track in your journal. You know what I mean? So if you don't want to use our version exactly as is, there's still a lot on there because, again, there are certain things that need to be done in a certain order, or the foundational things that you absolutely can't neglect. But that'll also help you realize, like, okay, you better not be in month 4 of your new book's existence and you haven't done a critical analysis of, is my bio right? Is my description right? Can I finesse them in any way? Am I keeping my retail page updated with any industry reviews that I've gotten, blurbs, things like that? You know what I mean? So our book marketing planner is really great for as a reminder of the things that Penny's talking about that seem like they're not super sexy. They're kind of behind the scenes and you're like, really, does this matter? It absolutely does matter.
Yeah. Yeah, it absolutely does matter. Amy, do you want to take the mindset reset strategies, which again, I know sounds like we're going super down the woo-woo hole on it, but I love this stuff. Do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, so this is great. Detach through curiosity is our first note. And, instead of judging results and thinking, nobody likes my book, why am I doing this? What a waste of my time. Figure out, as Penny mentioned, look at your tracker. What have you been doing? What worked? What didn't? Have I been doing it long enough? You know what I mean? That's another one too. We've talked about that in the past. Knee jerk assuming something didn't work simply because it didn't meet some unrealistic expectation you put on it. You know what I mean? So like you did a limited time discount and you didn't get 1,000 downloads. It's like, where did that number come from? It's like, let's be realistic. But then if you've been doing it for a while and you're not seeing any like changes in your engagement, in your downloads, in your sales, what can you do differently? How can you tweak it? And that's an important one too, Penny, I think. Sometimes it's tweaking. It's not completely abandoning something either,
Yeah, that's very, very true. Yeah.
What you can learn from it or what you can do slightly different. Because if you are implementing strategies that you've heard us talk about or that you've picked up on from other like really solid trusted sources in the industry, they absolutely work for some authors. You just have to determine, are you doing it correctly? And sometimes, is it right for my market? Because that's another thing that it's easy to fall into the trap of, I read that this is a thing, so it's got to work for me. That's not always the case either.
Right, exactly. There's a lot of power in detachment. I read a book on detachment like years ago, and of course, it's one of my woo-woo titles. I just love. But there's so much power in detaching from an outcome that really keeps, it's detachment is much more motivating than control is, frankly, right?
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is y'all gotta stop comparing yourself to everyone else, right? Limit your limit your comparison triggers. Again, I am not opposed to author Facebook groups. Great metrics, dashboards, things like that. Like, I should be doing better. I should be doing better. A lot of these posts, they're not, and I'm not saying that everybody on Facebook is lying. Like, I don't want to go back to your group. Penny said y'all are lying. Like, don't be posting that. But people need to bring the receipts for those posts because I've seen that, and maybe they are doing great, and cheer them on. I mean, I think that's amazing, right? But be really mindful of that.
Right.
not all of it is,
No.
not
I
all of it is really authentic.
that's a tough one because candidly,
Very tough.
unless you have written a book for the exact same readers,
Yep.
and you use the same cover designer, and you each have the same, you know what I mean? It would take you literally hours to make the kind of comparisons to make sure it all lined up before it would ever be realistic to compare yourself to another author. There are just so many factors that are involved.
There are
And
so many factors.
realistically, the ones that you are seeing that are celebrating these wins and sharing these wins, they were where you are right now at some point. They just weren't shouting that from the rooftop. So be mindful of that as well, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like when they talk about, so I remember when Adele first burst onto the scene, right? And everybody was just like, oh my gosh, she's an overnight success, right?
Right.
And that's, and I think she was actually asked that in an interview one time and she just laughed. That literally never happens to anybody,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
Even people that have their quote unquote breakout book, they've written other things. You know what I mean? Just
Yeah.
because they had a breakout, just because a book was a quick success for a particular author that you may have read about it that actually made the news at one point or was a headline, they've written before that didn't go anywhere. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So just also keep that in mind that even big name, household name authors that seem like they had a breakout moment, they had a lot of frustration, a lot of no's, a lot of duds. That's just part of life, candidly, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You want to take the next one? I love this one. I'm gonna have a lot to say because man, that's a tough one.
Right. Each no is data, it's not defeat. And that is very hard, especially
Very
when you
hard.
feel like you're getting a lot more no's than yeses. And that is something that we actually work with a lot of, we talk through with a lot of our clients, especially those that had big media plans, big media goals, things like this. And we had a client very recently that we had a fabulous conversation with in terms of reassessing what's working, what's not, what the barriers to entry may be. And they had a fantastic outlook on it and just said, this is, their response was from our feedback is that, yeah, this is telling me that X and Y are probably better options for me than Z going forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like clapping at my desk because that is exactly the right attitude to have. Marketing is also a lot of testing. You know,
That's
nobody nobody markets with the idea. Professional marketers don't market knowing we know this is 100% going to land with every single person we're intending to hit. No, marketing is also research. It's generating data, it's generating insight, it's learning. And it's what you do with that information that matters in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. And you have to reframe. So, and it's not really just about reframing rejection. It's also about reframing the silence. So, this is something that I know a lot of authors really struggle with. Like, well, I pitched 20 people and I didn't hear from a single one, right? I'd have conversations with authors about this all the time if they're doing their own marketing and they're really so typically sometimes people will tell you no, but sometimes they will just not respond. And that no response is a response, unfortunately, right? So don't take that personally either. It's just a matter of they get busy. They only take the, I mean, think about how we all are in email these days, right? It's like we all get so much and we respond to the things that are, part of some project we're working on or something that impacts us or whatever that is, right? Um, and I also think so creating expectation breaks. I think after big launches, um, just take some time, give yourself some distance from analyzing, right? Because distance, and I've seen this just, when I was first in business, like I was very much like I want to just respond right away to everything, respond to every email. And one of the things that I learned a long time ago is that stepping away from something that is, confusing me, or a problem I'm trying to work out, or whatever it is. Distance really creates clarity. And it also does that. It also creates clarity for expectations. So don't be so tethered to your whole expectation mantra that you can't kind of step back and go for a walk or go to the park or something, that you're not so focused, because it also gives you a moment to kind of breathe. And part of the reason why, I think not just this is important, but this entire conversation is we have seen so many authors give up just short of the finish line, which is why this is so crucially important. Amy, you want to take the next one?
Yeah. So this is another really important one. And we talk about this a lot too with our clients. So marketing is a process of planting seeds, not hunting trophies.
Yes.
I love that so much. That is such a great, powerful line because, and again, this happens, both fiction and nonfiction, there's different reasons, but we do regularly remind our clients that there are so many factors that come into play when people buy a new book. They're really not the impulse items people think they are based on the price point most of the time. You know what I mean? So for fiction, usually people start looking for new books when they need a new book. That is very real, or when they have a trip coming up, or they know they have some free time, or because a friend recommended it randomly. People are typically not just constantly trolling for new books. And a couple of you listening might be like, oh, I am. But that's
I kind of do that, but okay.
I know. And then the same thing for nonfiction too, especially for nonfiction. People typically buy nonfiction when they have a goal in mind that they're ready to act on. If they have a problem that they're looking to solve, like usually it's very much an intentional move to buy a nonfiction book, no matter what the topic is. And so, we remind our clients, and this is if you're doing your own marketing as well, these are planting seeds. We're trying to plant seeds. So whether it's fiction or nonfiction, when that person that is in your target market is actually starting to look for a book that suits their needs, they've already been introduced to your book in a few different ways. You know what I mean? That is our goal. That is our mission. And that should be yours too if you're doing your own marketing. You want to make sure that they've organically been introduced to your book through different channels, different platforms, you know what I mean, in different ways, because then you are top of mind when they start thinking about the next book they're going to buy, or when they get ready to make that next move with whatever problem they're trying to solve or answer they're looking to find.
Well, but the other thing, I saw this meme the other day that said, you wouldn't expect a tree to grow the minute you plant a seed, right? So that is always an important analogy to kind of keep in mind too, is that a lot of what you're doing is seed planting, and which is part of the reason why we say, you want to just start that seed planting as early as you can. If you're starting it on publication date, don't expect those to sprout on day 2, because that's just not the way that it works. The other thing that I want to mention, and I think maybe in closing, is definitely revisit some of our other episodes, because we've covered media, Amazon ads. If you're a new listener, first off, welcome. We love that you're here. But we've done shows. So next year will be our 6th year. I can't believe it. We've done shows on pretty much anything: Amazon ads, influencer pitching, all the things. And I think that it's just important to make sure that your expectations are actually aligning with the current marketplace and what the marketplace needs. And one other way that you can also do that is, so the Alliance of Independent Authors just had their conference. I'm actually listening to some of the classes they did. They did a terrific job this year, as they always do. But start to attend some writers conferences, whether in person or virtual. That'll give you a better sense, I think, of what the marketplace needs. So, Amy said this early on in the show: success is consistency, right? Consistency in anything, just consistently showing up, focusing on your readers, and not getting so hung up on the results that you may or may not be getting, right?
Yeah. I think it's definitely, I love this. Success isn't about control. It's about commitment.
Yeah.
That is very much true. And that is one of the things, and we've mentioned this before, and I think it gets lost a lot, that every marketing effort, typically there's 2 or 3 additional things that you can do to support that.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense, Penny, because this feels like a lot, and and that's fair. It can be, but just make sure you're also making the most of the effort you're putting in. So don't just completely, it's kind of like how we say, don't just keep publishing books without doing any marketing or branding, because then you just have a bunch of books that nobody exists. It's kind of the same thing with your marketing effort. Don't just keep pumping it out without doing some critical assessment and doing some thoughtful follow-up with those efforts. It's about quality over quantity sometimes, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the final piece of this is stop tying your worth to results and start making decisions that are not based on anything other than focusing on, the long-term success. Unfortunately, there is no instant gratification in publishing a book. Sadly, I wish there were. And I wish that we had a recipe for that. Otherwise, Amy and I would both be doing this podcast from our homes in the south of France. But I really love the show. I'm so glad that we took the time to do this. I think especially like this time of year when we're kind of like revisiting how everything went this year for us and how our marketing did. It's just really good to kind of step back and reevaluate that. And I want to thank, so we had some new reviews that popped up. Thank you all so much for your reviews. And we've started to get some responses on our texting line. If you haven't signed up to communicate with us, text the word podcast to 888-402-8940. Save that number, whitelist that number, whatever you need to do, and you can communicate with us. Send us your show ideas, what you think of the show, what you'd like to see more of. And we thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.